Good afternoon. Welcome. Please be seated. We're so pleased you could be here, especially during this season, which in many ways is a season of hope and a season of children. It is exciting for the President and every member of this administration, some of whom are here with us today, to be able to hold this event in our White House during the Christmas season. We are trying very hard in our country to help our children. It is one of the reasons why the administration and so many members of Congress are working to rebuild America, to reform our health care system so that the 9 million American children who are now uninsured will have health security, to give all of our children not only health security, but physical security, so they can play on the streets in front of their homes, go to the parks, go to school without fear. We have always had a commitment to children in our country, but it is one that we now need to reaffirm and strengthen. But the American commitment to children does not end at our own borders. Our commitment for a healthy, safe childhood holds true for children everywhere. And together we must, again, especially in this season, work to ensure that children all over the world have a chance to see their own dreams come true. It gives me particular pleasure to introduce the truly remarkable man who has led UNICEF for the last 14 years. In Jim Grant's 50 years of international service, he has extended his passionate and infectious enthusiasm for children to every capital and corner of the globe. Whether it has been promoting childhood immunization and education, or making it clear that a 5-cent package of life-saving salt and sugar for children threatened by fatal dehydration was there for the asking, he has helped focus global attention on the enormous potential of all of our children, and by doing so has helped to redefine what we mean when we talk about global development, peace, and prosperity. He also challenges us with practical steps we can all take to assure the well-being of children, reminding us on a daily basis that we must do what is doable for our children. Anyone who knows Jim Grant knows what it means to be committed, but also knows how rare it is to be able to combine that commitment with laughter and humor and love. And so there is a lesson not only in what he has done in his leadership of UNICEF, but in the example he has given to all of us as to what public service really means. Please join me in welcoming Jim Grant.
Please. Mr. President, Mr. Clinton, friends, and I really should say colleagues. This audience is full of colleagues and fellow conspirators, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Clinton, for your very gracious introduction, overly kind. Mr. President, it's my privilege to present this report to you at a time when something quite extraordinary is happening in the world. For in the midst of all the tragedies that we read about in our newspapers, from Sarajevo, from Somalia, which almost daily provoke our sorrow and our anger, there is quieter but equally important good news to report. Let me report to you today that the war on the great diseases of childhood, the diseases and disabilities which stunt the development of peoples and of nations, is a war that is being won. The evidence is here in this report. The toll of measles, tetanus, diarrheal disease, polio, whooping cough, the diseases that kill, maim, and malnourish so many millions of our world's children, have been cut almost in half in the last few years. Some 4 million child lives are now being saved each year because of these programs. And in addition, Mr. President, there are today more than 3 million children who are running and playing normally, but who would have been crippled by polio were it not for the advances that we have seen in recent years. Given determined leadership, Mr. President, I have no doubt at all that we can now turn this momentum into a final offensive against some of the most serious threats to the lives, the health, and the normal growth of the world's children. Not in my lifetime, Mr. President, has there been such a momentum of change for children. It is a momentum of practical achievement, as I've just documented, and it is a momentum of political commitment. Since the 1990 World Summit for Children, over 150 of the world's presidents and prime ministers have pledged their governments to achieving measurable goals for the year 2000, to control the major childhood diseases, to eradicate polio, to halving child malnutrition, to making sure that virtually every child has a basic education, and to make family planning services available to all who need them. Now, those leaders have also agreed to specific goals for the mid-decades by December 1995. If those 1995 goals are achieved, Mr. President, it would mean that 2 million children that died in 1992 will not die in 1996. It will wipe out the world's most important cause of mental impairment, iodine deficiency. It will virtually end the vitamin A deficiency that blinds 250,000 children every year. And I want to express today my conviction that there has never been an opportunity like the one before us today. These goals are doable. If, there's some ifs here, if the leaders of the industrialized world give their moral and material support to these commitments, if all of us put our muscle behind the wheel that is beginning to turn, there are groups like the Rotarians, the Kiwanis, the JCs, who are putting up hundreds of millions of dollars. If we give these commitments the same kind of encouragement that has been shown to Gorbachev and Yeltsin, to Mandela and de Klerk, and most recently, in these premises, to Rabin and Arafat, I think that what you did here increased by at least 100% the prospects of success of their agreement. Mr. President, your administration has articulated better than any other in my lifetime the profound connection between the mental and physical development of children and the social and economic development of this great country. This report is premised on the global validity of that relationship, that the same applies globally. That is why its central message is that achieving the goals that have been agreed, doing what can now be done readily for the world's children, is not just the greatest of humanitarian causes, but also the greatest of investments in the future of the human race. Mr. President, what an investment that would be in our common future. It's an investment in economic development. We saw that in East Asia. It's an investment in slowing population growth. I've seen no better articulation of the mix of why this happens than Vice President Gore has so effectively shown in his book, Earth in the Balance, in protecting the environment and in promoting political stability within and between nations. None of the new democracies is going to long survive unless it can bring major benefits to the bottom half of its population, to its health and education of its children. Never has a greater human achievement beckoned our commitment, and never has a greater human investment invited our participation. In your September speech to the General Assembly, Mr. President, you said, "We are compelled to do better by the world's children," and you called for a new commitment to that cause. As a contribution to that goal, it gives me great pleasure, in the presence of so many distinguished colleagues, and I would call heroes for children of the world that are here in front of us, to present to you the 1994 State of the World's Children Report, to you personally, to the President of the United States. I do so in the hope that the advancement of these great goals for children of the world will become one of the defining achievements of your presidency, and in the hope and with the confidence that you will offer the support and leadership of this great country to this great cause.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. Hillary and I are delighted to have you and so many of your friends from around America here today for the presentation of this report. We especially appreciate the presence here. I see Senator Leahy, Senator Sarbanes, and Congressman Obey. I don't know if Senator Dole and Congressman Porter are here, but I think they were coming. I'm delighted to see from the administration Tim Worth from the State Department, Secretary Shalala from HHS, our United Nations Ambassador Madeleine Albright, our aide administrator Brian Atwood, and Surgeon General Dr. Joycelyn Elders. And there are many other distinguished people here, but most of all, I'm glad to see the children here. For after all, we're here to celebrate a season filled with the joy of children and to remind ourselves of much of the work still to be done. James Agee once wrote, "In every child who is born, under no matter what circumstances, the potentiality of the human race is born again, and in him, too, our terrific responsibility toward human life, toward the utmost idea of goodness, the horror of error, and of God." We are here in part to note the outstanding work of the fine man who just spoke. Jim Grant and UNICEF are among the best friends any child could have. UNICEF was the driving force behind the historic World Summit for Children 3 years ago, when leaders of 150 nations met to define the goals for improving health and welfare of our children by the year 2000. Jim and UNICEF continue to see that all the rest of us do our part to make progress toward those goals. Today, with the annual State of the World's Children report, UNICEF lays down another marker for the rest of us. The U.S. Agency for International Development also releases its own report on child survival, and these impressive reports both mark the progress that has been made, as well as outlining what still we must do. They document, for example, that over the past decade, the international community has reduced the incidences of some of the world's worst childhood diseases, measles, polio, and neonatal tetanus, by over half. Yet we have still so much to do. Around the world, children suffer more than anyone else from poverty, malnutrition, disease, environmental decay, and even armed conflict. Today and every day in villages and neighborhoods around the globe, 30,000 children will die from malnutrition and preventable disease. As Jim has noted, behind each of these statistics, there's a face, a family, a set of hopes and dreams, and a future that now will never be. And while the plight of children abroad is especially acute, we must never forget that poverty, hunger, and disease are not strangers to our children here in the United States. 1 of every 5 of our children lives in poverty. By the time they're 15 years old, nearly 1/3 of our children in inner cities will have known someone who has died violently. One of my highest goals is to see that the next generation of our children grows up with more health, more security, more safety, and more hope than those of this generation. That's one of the reasons why we work so hard for the Family and Medical Leave Act, for the new crime bill, for the Brady bill, and perhaps most importantly, for universal health care coverage for all of our people. The First Lady and Secretary Shalala and others are working on a health care reform plan that, when enacted, will provide complete preventive care and health security for over 8 million American children that today are uninsured. We're working to boost the immunization rate of our 2-year-olds to 90%, striving to ensure adequate nutrition for all of our children, including full funding for the Women's, Infants, and Children's Feeding Program, fighting the plague of violence against our children, and committed also to improving the lives of children in other lands, not out of simple charity, but also out of prudence. Because investing in the children of the world can be the most cost-effective way not only to relieve suffering, but to advance economies, to promote self-sufficiency, to promote democracy, and to avert future conflicts. There have been times when the fight for the world's children seemed to be a losing one, but the Children's Summit and related events have transformed that frustration into hope. Our own nation can take pride in decades of our leadership, with bipartisan support here at home on behalf of worldwide efforts to improve children's health. The continuing leadership of this nation is revealed in the work of the 6 health heroes we will honor here today, and countless others like them. Building on their contributions and concentrating on the most cost-effective way of helping children, we're making great strides in areas like immunization and child nutrition. We're determined to build on this progress. Under the direction of Aid Director Brian Atwood, we propose an overhaul of our foreign assistance programs to reflect new times and new priorities. At the heart of this is a vision for sustainable development centered on human development, a vision that will help us to make progress in child health, population, and environmental protection, a cause the Vice President has done so much to advance. Working with UNICEF and other governmental and non-governmental organizations, we want to make those goals at the Children's Summit come true. That's the best Christmas present we could give to the world. So today I call on Americans in private and public life to join with leaders in developing nations to help ensure that we do make tangible progress, especially in 3 key areas. First, by the year 2000, we ought to set our sights on getting 90% of the world's children vaccinated for measles and on virtually eradicating polio, as surely as the world eradicated smallpox decades ago. Second, we should strive to give at least 80% of the world's children access to life-saving treatment for the world's 2 biggest childhood killers, diarrhea and pneumonia. Third, on nutrition, the world can make enormous improvements through simple steps, such as eliminating vitamin A deficiency, which can be deadly, and by promoting more breastfeeding for infants. These are simple, low-cost strategies. They don't require space-age technology. They rely on basic medicines, inexpensive vaccines, drinkable water, access to family planning, and expanded educational opportunities, especially for women and girls. And we can afford to do our part in this effort, because the financial burden will be shared among many nations. If we let the world's children suffer, we know that in time we'll reap a bitter harvest of despair and desperation and violence. We know that when children grow up healthy and nurtured, they're more likely to do better by their own children. They're more likely to become citizens and contributors, more likely to add to the global marketplace. This is how free societies and open markets evolve, how global progress happens, how future friends of the United States and these children will be created. We still call this, I think instructively, the post-Cold War era. The problem with that designation is it tells us where we've been, but not where we're going. We have to chart a new path, channeling the remarkable forces at work in this era with a bold vision of what might be. Let us today commit that our children and the world's children will figure large in that vision, that the post-Cold War era will instead be the world's era of peace and prosperity and humanity, in which our minds and hearts work together to give all children a better life. Now I'd like to ask our 6 health heroes to step forward and to be recognized for the outstanding work they've done. First, Dr. Gretchen Berggren. Being recognized for her lifelong commitment to the health of the world's children as a medical missionary and an innovator in community-based nutrition and primary health care. Thank you. Next, Dr. William Fagey. For his long commitment to the health of the world's children through his global leadership on immunization goals and the eradication of smallpox. Congratulations, Dave. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Norbert Hirschhorn. For his distinguished career in public health and his leadership in demonstrating the value of oral rehydration therapy to change children's lives all around the world. Thank you, sir. Dr. Donald Hopkins. For his leadership in the global effort to eradicate guinea worm and other diseases and to assure safe water and better sanitation to support children's health around the world. Patrice Jelliff. For her lifetime commitment to the world's children as a public health expert, promoting breastfeeding and appropriate weaning foods and practices in the developing world. Thank you so much. Dr. Carl E. Taylor. For his sustained work around the world from India to Beijing, which has demonstrated key linkages among nutrition, family size, and other efforts in child survival. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the World Children Choir.
Make
want to thank the choir for being with us and for sharing their voices and talents with us. We want to thank all of the children who are here, some of whom are in schools that have special relationships with UNICEF. And we particularly want to thank those who were honored here. They each, in their own way, have done so much to make it possible for us with a straight face to say that we are committed to the children of the world. But even more remains to be done. It would be unforgivable if we did not utilize and build upon the breakthroughs which many of the people here in this room have helped to make. It would be unforgivable if many millions of children should continue to die or be stunted in their growth, blinded or learning impaired, because the world has neglected to take care of their most basic needs. And it would be unforgivable if we in this country did not redouble our efforts to assure that the children in the richest and most blessed land on earth were not given all that they needed to be able to fulfill their God-given potentials. We believe that we will meet that challenge to our children here at home and do our part to lead and meet the challenge on behalf of children around the world. So in this season of hope and this season of children, we want to recognize those who have already given a great deal. We want to acknowledge not only those whose names are known to us, but the millions around the world who every day reach out to help a child, taking care of their own and their neighbors' children, building their neighborhoods and their villages. And there are many Americans right here at home involved in this struggle, as well as around the world. And for their sake, those who labor every day, but mostly for the sake of the children on whose behalf they labor, let us use this Christmas season really to mean what we say and to be committed throughout the year, every day, to making life better for our children here and throughout the world. If that be our commitment, then by this time next year, we will have gains to show for it, and millions of children will be living better because of it. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and let's work for our children. Thank you.